Hello, my name is Dorothy Plumpton, and today I'm going to be telling you a little bit about the death penalty. Many people here know what the death penalty is, but for the people who are not aware of the death penalty, it is when someone is convicted of a crime that is then punishable by death. These crimes go to court, to a judge and a jury, and unanimously they will decide the sentencing and if they are guilty enough to go either spend their life in prison without parole, spend their life on death row, or if they're going to be punished by death. Out of the 50 states, 32 of them have the death penalty as a legal form of punishment. So that means that the 8 remaining states do not, which just means that if you were, found guilty of a crime in another state that did not have the death penalty as a crime, then as a punishment, then you wouldn't get the death penalty. You would just either serve life in prison, get many years, 25 years to life, something like that. Typically, people who are on death row can recant it, go back to a judge, go back to the court, and kind of try and say that, they're not guilty, that they shouldn't have to die, all this type of stuff. Out of the 32 states that do have the death penalty as a legal form of punishment, they all believe that, murder is like the biggest crime to be convicted, to be on the death row, to be sentenced by death. But it's all different types of murder. So some are like first-degree murder, second-degree murder, homicide, etc. But some other states do include kidnapping and sexual assault. Typically, they have to be, very severe offenses, not just like the small, he said, she said type thing, wouldn't get someone sentenced to death, but it's typically like very cruel forms of like sexual assault, kidnapping, and, either they led to death or, the person was very traumatized and scarred from what had the experience that they had had. Most people consider the death penalty a cruel and unusual punishment for people to go through. Why should these people have to die? They can just go to prison for the rest of their life. Well, it costs over $90,000 a year to keep one person in prison on death row for a year, because you house them, you feed them, the guards then have to be watching these people 24/7. For someone who doesn't have a house, for someone who's homeless, committing a crime and going to prison, that's better than living on the streets. Now you have food, you have shelter, you have a bed, you have blankets. Yes, it's not the ideal situation, but then again, now you have a place to live, you have food to get. So many people think it's that. It does cost only $86.08 to kill someone with lethal injection, which is the most typical form of death penalty, the way for someone to die on death row. There are some states who still do the electric chair and gas chambers, but you really don't hear of those sorts of things except from when the death penalty was first brought around. So that's millions of dollars every year for people to just sit around in prison and, be able to eat, there's homeless people living on the streets that don't get food every day, that don't have a shelter, and people who then commit murders, who commit all sorts of crimes, robbery and all this type of stuff. Now they get somewhere to sleep. So, it's kind of not fair when you think of it from that point of view, where people are more thinking like, well, that's really cruel for us to murder this person because they made a mistake or they did this. But it's like, think, they just murdered someone, or, they just sexually assaulted someone or kidnapped them and tortured them. It's like, you really have to think that these are like the same thing. They murdered someone, so now it's kind of like, okay, well, they're getting what they did, kind of like what they deserve. But not everyone sees it that way. Not everyone agrees that doing the death penalty is the correct thing or the right thing to do. Many people have been proven innocent over years, but with the most technology that we have now and all the DNA testing they can do, when things like this go to court and the death penalty is brought up, it's so very serious because this isn't taken lightly anymore. This is something that people, they really, really, invest their time into, and they really want to make sure that they're not going to submit someone to death row when, they were innocent of this crime, or tell them that they're going to die. It does cost, when people stay on death row, it does cost the $90,000 a year. It costs about like $31,000 a year. I read on one site to keep a prisoner in prison every year. That's taxpayer dollars for someone to commit a crime and go to jail. And most small crimes that people commit, it's because they're homeless and they need a place to stay, and they're not going to a shelter, or they can't go to a shelter anymore, so they commit crimes and they go to jail. Now they've got the food, the housing, the clothing. You've got everything you need in jail, even though it's kind of a war on the inside as it is on the outside. So from that point of view, it would cost a lot less money if people were put onto the death row as it would just keeping them in prison. With all the technology we have and all the state-of-the-art things that the police and FBI agents have, that it's really not as likely anymore that people are going to jail for crimes that they did not actually commit. Most of these statistics and these facts I'm getting, I got them from the deathpenaltyinformation.org website. It gives basically everything about the death penalty, stories, cases, the states that have death penalty legal, states that do not, the states that do have it legal, all the things that are under the death penalty, things that you can be convicted of to go to jail with the death penalty, and then things that, reasons why certain states said that we're not going to do this, when they, abolished the death penalty in their state, and why some states keep it, why some states don't. So it has a lot of information, from both sides, to people who agree with it and people that don't, people that disagree with the death penalty. So it's definitely something, if you're interested in reading up more and getting some more information on the death penalty, I definitely suggest you do some more research. You look into that website. There's some other websites that I visited about the death penalty. You just type it into Google and you can read all on it. I hope this video gave you some great information. I hope it left you with wondering what your views might be on the death penalty, and thank you for watching.